A night meant to seal love and joy turned into horror when a 45-year-old bride discovered her husband's darkest secret. He was the monster who destroyed her daughter's innocence. What followed was a spiral of rage, betrayal, and an unthinkable act that shocked everyone who knew them. Sometimes, life paints illusions so perfect that we fail to see the cracks beneath. For Clara Simmons, a devoted mother and woman longing for companionship, her wedding night was supposed to be her fresh beginning. Instead, it unveiled a horrifying truth that no mother should ever bear. In the space of a heartbeat, love turned into betrayal, passion into disgust, and hope into rage. Tonight, we unravel Clara's tragic story, one of trust, family bonds, hidden monsters, and the cost of rage. Before we dive into this harrowing tale, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on your notifications so you never miss these deep-dive true crime stories. Share this video with someone who loves suspenseful narratives, and let's journey into the darkness of secrets and lies together. Clara Simmons, at 45, was a woman many described as graceful and resilient. Her life had not been easy, but she carried herself with a quiet strength that drew people in. As a nurse in a busy city hospital, she had spent decades tending to the sick, comforting grieving families, and saving lives under pressure. Her heart was large, but it bore scars that came from loving deeply, losing tragically, and raising her daughter single-handedly. Clara had been widowed at the age of 32 when her husband, Thomas, died suddenly of a heart attack. The pain had been immense, almost unbearable, but Clara had no choice but to keep going. Emily, her daughter, was just 3 years old at the time, with big brown eyes and a smile that mirrored her father's. Clara poured everything into that little girl, promising herself that Emily would never lack the love, support, or stability she deserved. And she kept that promise. Through sleepless nights and endless double shifts at the hospital, she worked tirelessly to build a life for her child. For years, Clara shut herself off from the idea of romance. The memory of Thomas was too fresh, and the responsibilities of being both mother and father left no room for companionship. Her world revolved around Emily, her school projects, her first piano recital, her laughter as they baked cookies on rainy afternoons. Emily was Clara's anchor, the bright spot in her otherwise grueling life. But as Emily grew older, preparing for college, Clara began to feel the loneliness creep in. Nights after work, she would sit at the kitchen table, staring at the empty chair across from her. Friends encouraged her to start dating again, but Clara always brushed it off with a soft laugh. "Who has time for that?" she would say. In truth, she feared love, feared opening her heart again only for it to be shattered. That changed the day she met David Turner. It was a rainy Thursday evening. Clara had just finished a long shift and stopped by a local cafe for coffee before heading home. The cafe was nearly empty, the smell of roasted beans mingling with the soft jazz playing in the background. Clara stood at the counter, fumbling with her wallet, when she heard a warm, deep voice behind her. "Allow me," the man said, stepping forward to pay for her drink. Clara looked up, startled, and met the piercing blue eyes of David Turner. He was tall, well-dressed, and carried himself with effortless confidence. His salt and pepper hair gave him a distinguished look, and his smile was the kind that seemed to light up the room. Clara politely declined his offer, but David insisted with a playful charm that made her laugh despite herself. That night, they sat together at a corner table, sipping coffee and talking. To Clara's surprise, the conversation flowed easily. David asked about her work, about Emily, about her dreams. He listened intently, his gaze never drifting, and Clara felt seen in a way she hadn't in years. He shared stories about his business ventures, his love for travel, and his appreciation for the simple joys of life. Over the next few weeks, David began to appear more in Clara's world. Sometimes he would stop by the hospital with lunch during her breaks. Other times, he would surprise her with flowers or handwritten notes. He wasn't pushy, but he was consistent, patiently winning her trust. Slowly, Clara's walls began to crumble. Emily, though initially protective, noticed how her mother's face lit up whenever David's name was mentioned. She saw the spark returning to Clara's eyes, a spark she hadn't seen since her father's death. "Mom," Emily teased one evening, "I think you're finally in love again." Clara had blushed, denying it, but deep down she knew her daughter was right. 2 years passed, and David became an integral part of their lives. He attended Emily's graduation, cheered her on during her dance showcases, and often cooked dinners with Clara in the small but cozy Simmons kitchen. Neighbors began to comment on how radiant Clara looked, how happy she seemed. For the first time in a long while, Clara believed she had been given a second chance at love. When David proposed during a weekend getaway at a vineyard, Clara's eyes filled with tears. He knelt before her, holding a ring that glistened in the afternoon sun, and said, "Clara, I've loved you from the moment I met you. You and Emily are my family. Will you marry me?" Her heart, hesitant for so long, finally said yes. The wedding preparations became a family affair. Emily took her role as maid of honor seriously, helping her mother pick out a gown, taste cakes, and choose floral arrangements. Every moment was filled with laughter, but also emotion. Clara often found herself pausing, overcome with gratitude for the life she was building. For the first time since losing Thomas, she felt like she could breathe again. The wedding day arrived in late spring. The small chapel was adorned with soft white roses and golden candles, the air fragrant with hope. Clara walked down the aisle in a lace gown, her veil cascading like a waterfall of dreams. Guests turned, admiring her elegance, but Clara only had eyes for David waiting at the altar. His smile was wide, his hands steady, and in that instant, she felt safe. Emily stood beside her mother, radiant in a pale blue dress, her eyes glistening with joy. When the vows were exchanged, Emily caught her mother's gaze and nodded approvingly. It was a silent message, "It's okay, Mom. You deserve this." The ceremony was followed by a lively reception. Laughter echoed as glasses clinked, music played, and guests danced the night away. Clara and David shared their first dance under a canopy of twinkling lights, his hand firmly around her waist, her head resting on his chest. For Clara, it felt like the perfect ending to years of loneliness and sacrifice. In that moment, she had no idea that the man holding her so tenderly was the very one who had shattered her daughter's world. She didn't know the truth hidden beneath his smile, the darkness behind his charm. To her, David Turner was love reborn, a miracle she had dared not dream of. But reality has a cruel way of unraveling illusions. And Clara's illusion, so carefully built, was about to be destroyed in the most brutal way possible. Emily Simmons, at 19, was the very definition of innocence mixed with resilience. She had grown up as her mother's pride and joy, the center of Clara's world. With her long chestnut hair, bright eyes, and gentle demeanor, she carried an aura of grace that drew people toward her. But behind the warmth of her smile and the polite nod she gave to friends and strangers alike, Emily carried a secret so heavy that it bent her spirit and threatened to consume her. 2 years earlier, Emily had been the victim of a violent attack, an attack that stole more than her innocence. It stole her confidence, her sense of safety, her laughter that once came so freely. She was walking home after a late-night study session at her best friend Hannah's house. The streets were quiet, shadows stretching long under the dim street lamps. Emily had felt uneasy but told herself not to overthink. After all, she had walked that path countless times. She never saw him coming. A tall man stepped out from the darkness, blocking her path. His cologne hit her first, sharp, musky, unforgettable. Then came his voice, low and raspy, sending shivers down her spine. Before she could react, he grabbed her, his strength overwhelming, his intentions vile. The struggle was brief but brutal. Her cries for help were muffled, her body pinned, her world shattered in those moments. When it was over, Emily lay broken on the cold ground, trembling, unable to move. The man left her there, but not before turning to reveal part of his face under the dim light. A scar near his jawline that cut across his skin like a permanent reminder of cruelty. Emily's mind seared the image into her memory. Every detail, the scar, the cologne, the way he smirked as if proud of what he had done, burned itself into her soul. That night, she returned home bruised and broken. Clara, horrified, rushed her to the hospital. The police were called, questions were asked, reports were filed. But Emily, her voice fragile and her eyes hollow, refused to recount all the details. She begged her mother not to press further, not to drag her deeper into the nightmare she wanted to forget. "Please, "Mom," she whispered through tears, "I don't want to relive it. I just want to move on." Clara's heart broke at her daughter's plea. She respected Emily's wishes, though inside she seethed with helpless rage. The investigation went cold without Emily's full testimony. The man vanished like a shadow, leaving only scars behind, both visible and invisible. In the 2 years that followed, Emily tried desperately to stitch her life back together. Outwardly, she pushed forward. She applied to college, maintained her friendships, and supported her mother with an unwavering smile. But late at night, when the world was silent, her nightmares returned. She would wake in cold sweats, her hands clutching her sheets, the phantom scent of that cologne filling her nose. She never told anyone, not even her mother, that sometimes she thought she could hear his voice in the darkness. Still, Emily was strong. She had inherited her mother's resilience, and though she was broken, she refused to let her pain define her. She focused on her mother's happiness, determined not to let her trauma overshadow Clara's chance at love. When David came into their lives, Emily kept her distance at first. Something about him unsettled her. His smile seemed too smooth, his gaze lingering longer than it should. But Clara glowed in his presence, and Emily told herself she was simply being paranoid. "Mom deserves happiness," Emily repeated to herself often. "Don't ruin this for her." She never mentioned the flicker of recognition she sometimes felt when David was near. The scent of his cologne seemed eerily familiar. The way his voice carried certain inflections made her skin prickle. But every time the thought arose, Emily shoved it down, burying it deep inside. No, it can't be him. That's impossible. On Clara's wedding day, Emily forced herself to focus on her mother's joy. Dressed in a soft blue gown as maid of honor, she stood by Clara's side with a practiced smile. Guests complimented her beauty, telling her how proud her late father would be, how radiant she looked. Emily nodded, smiled, and thanked them. No one could see the storm raging beneath her calm exterior. As David stood at the altar, waiting for Clara, Emily's chest tightened. His polished suit, his confident stance, his charming smile, it all fit the image of the perfect groom. Yet, when his eyes met hers across the chapel, Emily felt her stomach twist. The scar near his jawline caught the light for the briefest second. She blinked, telling herself she imagined it, that her mind was playing tricks on her. But deep inside, her instincts screamed. Throughout the ceremony, Emily fought the urge to tremble. She wanted to be happy for her mother. She wanted to believe David was the man he claimed to be, the one who had supported Clara, who had shown her kindness. And yet, as the vows were exchanged, Emily felt as though the air was thick, suffocating, pressing against her chest. When David kissed her mother, sealing their vows, Emily forced herself to clap with the others. But inside, her heart whispered a warning. Something isn't right. Something about him is wrong. At the reception, Emily kept herself busy with the guests, avoiding David's gaze. She laughed when she needed to, danced when asked, and posed for pictures. But her mind was elsewhere, circling back to the scar, the cologne, the familiar rasp of his voice when he toasted to his new family. She couldn't shake the feeling that fate was playing a cruel trick on her. By the end of the evening, she brushed away her unease. "It's Mom's day," she told herself firmly. "Don't ruin it for her." She convinced herself that her trauma was making her see connections where none existed. After all, what were the chances? The world was big. Her attacker could have been anyone. Still, as she hugged her mother goodbye that night, wishing her happiness on her honeymoon, Emily whispered, "Be careful, Mom." Clara, touched by her daughter's concern, kissed her forehead and laughed gently. "Oh, sweetheart, I've never been happier. Don't worry." Emily smiled, but her chest was heavy. She walked away that night unaware that the truth she feared was closer than she could imagine, that the man she had grown to tolerate for her mother's sake was indeed the same monster from her nightmares. And soon, the secret she had buried for years would explode into the open in the most devastating way possible. The reception slowly dwindled into the late hours of the night. Guests trickled out, their laughter echoing down the hotel corridors as the music faded. Clara and David, newly crowned husband and wife, were finally alone. The suite David had booked was extravagant, perched high above the city skyline, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a sweeping view of glittering lights below. Clara stood by the window for a moment, still in her wedding gown, the fabric catching the dim glow of the chandelier. She let out a soft sigh of happiness, her heart swelling with the belief that this night marked the start of a new, beautiful chapter. David emerged from the bathroom, his broad figure draped in a white robe, his hair still damp from the shower. He looked every bit the groom, confident, satisfied, and full of charm. "You were breathtaking tonight," he said with a smile, his voice carrying that familiar rasp. He stepped closer, reaching for her hand. "I can't believe you're finally mine, Clara." Clara blushed, her cheeks warming at his words. She had been nervous about this night, not because of David but because it had been so long since she had let anyone close to her in that way. She took a breath, steadying her nerves. "I'm yours," she whispered, her voice filled with sincerity. But as David leaned in to kiss her, Clara's eyes caught something, an imperfection along his jawline. A scar. It was faint under the golden light, but it was there. For the briefest second, her body stiffened. She had seen scars before, of course, she was a nurse, but something about this one made her pause. She brushed it off at first, telling herself she was just tired, that her nerves were overreacting. David kissed her tenderly, his lips warm against hers. His cologne filled her senses, sharp, musky, and oddly familiar. Clara's breath faltered. She had smelled that scent before. Somewhere distant, somewhere wrong. Her heart gave a single, startled thump in her chest. As David spoke again, his voice rasping with that signature timbre, Clara's mind began to swirl. She felt dizzy, her thoughts racing. Why does his voice sound familiar? Why does that cologne make me uneasy? She pulled back slightly, her gaze narrowing on his face. The scar. The scent. The voice. And then, like a puzzle clicking into place, the truth slammed into her. Clara's knees nearly buckled. Memories of Emily's trembling voice from 2 years ago flooded her mind, the night her daughter came home shattered, whispering details she never wanted to repeat. The scar on the jawline. The sharp cologne. The rasp in his voice. Clara had held her daughter as she cried, had filed the police report, had listened helplessly as Emily begged her not to push for details. She had buried the anger, choosing instead to focus on helping her daughter heal. But now the man standing in front of her, the man she had just vowed to love until death, matched every haunting description. Her chest tightened, her breath quickened. The walls of the lavish suite seemed to close in around her. "No," she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible. "It can't be." David tilted his head, puzzled by her sudden distance. "Clara? What's wrong?" His tone was smooth, but the question only made her skin crawl. Clara stumbled back, her hand flying to her mouth as nausea surged through her. Her eyes were wide, locked on the scar, the smirk tugging at his lips, the very smirk Emily had described through tears. Clara's vision blurred with hot tears, rage building in her chest. "It's you," she hissed, her voice trembling with horror. "It was you." David's expression faltered. For a split second, panic flashed in his eyes before he masked it with denial. "Clara, what are you talking about? You're exhausted. This is our wedding night. Don't ruin it with. Don't you dare." Clara's voice cracked like thunder. She pointed a shaking finger at him, her entire body trembling. "You're the one who hurt Emily. You're the monster who destroyed my daughter's life." The words hung in the air like a curse, her accusation shattering the illusion of their perfect evening. David's jaw tightened. He took a step toward her, his voice lowering to that same menacing rasp. "Clara, calm down. You don't know what you're saying." But the sound of his voice was confirmation enough. Clara's heart pounded furiously in her chest, her stomach churning with disgust. The man she had trusted, loved, and married was the same predator her daughter had feared for years. The realization seared through her like fire, igniting a rage so fierce it drowned out every rational thought. Her hands shook violently. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she backed away, her mind torn between disbelief and fury. "How could you?" she screamed, her voice echoing through the suite. How could you look me in the eye, look her in the eye, and pretend to love us? David opened his mouth to speak, but Clara didn't hear him. All she could hear was her daughter's cries from 2 years ago, all she could see was Emily's broken face, all she could smell was that cologne that now made her gag. The truth was undeniable. Her world, once filled with the promise of love and renewal, had turned into a nightmare. The wedding night was no longer a celebration of love. It had become the stage for a revelation so devastating, it would change the course of Clara's life forever. The silence of the bridal suite was deceptive. Outside, the world still celebrated, music pulsed faintly through the hotel walls, laughter echoed from guests who lingered in the ballroom. But inside, Clara stood frozen, her heart pounding with a violent rhythm that threatened to shatter her ribs. The words David had let slip, the confession he never meant to reveal, still ricocheted in her mind. He was the one. The man who had destroyed Emily. The monster who had stolen her daughter's innocence. Clara's chest heaved, torn between disbelief and the burning truth she could not ignore. Her hand trembled as she clutched the edge of the vanity table, her wedding ring glinting mockingly in the dim lamplight. The man she had promised forever to, the man she had just married, was the same devil who had left her daughter broken and terrified. David, oblivious to the storm gathering in her, poured himself another glass of champagne. His eyes gleamed with satisfaction, his lips curled into a smug grin. Clara, he said, his voice smooth, almost taunting. We don't need to pretend anymore. You'll understand soon enough why things had to happen the way they did. Clara's skin crawled. Understand? How could he speak so casually about something so monstrous? Emily's tears flashed in her mind, her daughter's trembling hands as she once tried to describe the man who had hurt her. Clara remembered holding Emily, swearing she'd protect her from ever feeling such fear again. And now, her promise had been broken in the most twisted way. Her rage flared like wildfire. She moved closer to David, her voice low and trembling with venom. Do you have any idea what you've done? To Emily? To me? To this family? David chuckled, taking a slow sip. Oh, Clara. Don't act so self-righteous. It was a mistake, a lapse. She was there, I was drunk. But you got me in the end, didn't you? You're the prize. Her blood boiled. The gall of him, calling her daughter's pain a lapse. Red veiled her vision, and her chest rose and fell with furious intensity. Clara no longer saw a husband, no longer saw a man. She saw the predator who had haunted Emily's nightmares. Her eyes darted to the heavy silver candlestick sitting on the nightstand, a gift from one of the guests, wrapped and forgotten until now. Without hesitation, her fingers curled around it. The weight of the metal in her hands grounded her anger, focusing it into a deadly resolve. David barely noticed as she circled him, his smugness growing. You'll thank me one day, Clara. For keeping it in the family. For making sure no one ever knows. Thank him. The thought sent her over the edge. With a scream ripped from the deepest part of her being, Clara swung the candlestick with all the force of her rage. The blow landed on the side of David's head with a sickening crack, sending him sprawling across the floor. The champagne glass shattered, splattering golden liquid across the carpet like spilled blood. David groaned, his hands clutching his head as crimson seeped between his fingers. Clara, you're insane. But Clara wasn't finished. Years of suppressed grief, guilt, and helplessness poured into her next strike. Then another. Each swing punctuated by the image of Emily's tear-streaked face. The room echoed with the hollow clang of metal against bone until the sound was replaced only by Clara's ragged breathing. Finally, she dropped the candlestick, her body shaking violently. David lay still, his once smug expression erased forever, replaced by silence and blood. Clara's hands were stained, her gown spattered, her heart thundering as reality crept back into the room. She stumbled backward, pressing her palms against her mouth as a strangled sob tore from her throat. She had done the unthinkable. Out of love. Out of rage. Out of a need to protect Emily in a way she hadn't before. The bridal suite was no longer a sanctuary. It was a crime scene, a tomb of betrayal, vengeance, and shattered promises. And Clara stood in the center of it, trembling, broken, yet oddly relieved. For the first time since Emily's assault, she felt a grim justice had been served. But deep inside, fear slithered in. What would come next? How would she explain? Could she ever look Emily in the eyes again, knowing what she had done? Clara pressed her back against the wall, sliding down until she sat on the cold carpet. Her wedding dress pooled around her, stained with blood and regret. Outside, the faint echo of music played on, as if mocking her descent into darkness. The night that was meant to mark the beginning of a new chapter had instead ended in death, and there was no turning back. Clara's chest heaved as she stood over David's lifeless body, her hands trembling, slick with blood that wasn't hers but felt like it had seeped into her very soul. The room that was supposed to hold their honeymoon had turned into a chamber of horror. The satin sheets were torn, the champagne glasses shattered, the bouquet discarded on the floor like a cruel joke. Emily's voice was the first sound that broke through the fog in Clara's mind. "Mom," it was shaky, small, and terrified. She stood frozen by the door, her face pale as moonlight, her hands clamped over her mouth. Clara turned slowly, her eyes red, her hair undone from the careful styling of just hours ago. "Emily, he deserved it. He can't hurt you anymore." Her voice cracked between defiance and despair. Emily stumbled backward against the doorframe, tears streaking her cheeks. "But, Mom, what have you done?" The weight of those words hit Clara like a second blow. She looked down at David again, the man she had loved, trusted, and married just hours ago, now lying still on the floor. For a brief moment, she almost didn't recognize him. He wasn't her husband anymore, he was the monster who had violated her daughter. And yet, the reality of what she had done pressed harder on her chest with every passing second. The knock came, sharp, hesitant at first, then louder. "Mrs. Turner? Is everything all right in there?" It was the voice of the hotel concierge, polite but concerned. Emily's eyes darted to the door, panic blooming on her face. "Mom, they heard. They're going to come in." Clara swallowed hard, her breath ragged. There was no hiding it. No way to rewind the last 10 minutes. "Emily, listen to me," she whispered, grasping her daughter's shoulders with trembling hands. "No matter what happens now, remember this, I did this because I love you. Because he took something from you, and I couldn't let him get away with it." Before Emily could respond, the door burst open with the master key. A pair of hotel staff stepped inside, followed quickly by security. The scene froze them all in place, the bride in her torn gown, her hands stained with blood, the groom dead on the floor, and the trembling young girl crying by the door. It only took seconds for someone to call the police. When the officers arrived, Clara didn't resist. She stood silently, her wrists limp as the cold metal cuffs locked around them. Her eyes never left Emily's, even as the police read her rights. Emily sobbed uncontrollably, begging them not to take her mother away, but her words were drowned out by the heavy steps of officers moving in and the crackle of radios calling in the homicide. As they led Clara past the shocked hotel staff, she whispered again, almost to herself, "I had no choice." The courtroom was a universe away from that hotel room, but the weight of Clara's act still hung in every corner. She sat at the defendant's table, her once radiant presence dimmed. The prosecutors painted her as a murderer driven by rage. Her defense argued that she was a mother pushed beyond human limits, acting in the grip of trauma after learning the truth about her husband. Emily took the stand, her voice shaking as she recounted her assault and the horror of watching her mother discover it. Every word cut the courtroom deeper. Some jurors wiped tears. Even the judge paused more than once to let the room breathe. When Clara finally spoke, her words silenced everyone. "I know what I did was wrong. I took justice into my own hands. But in that moment, all I saw was the man who hurt my daughter standing in front of me, smiling as if nothing had ever happened. I snapped. And if the law says I must pay for it, then I will. But I will never, not for 1 second, regret standing up for my child." The gavel came down weeks later. Guilty of second-degree murder. Sentenced to 25 years in prison. The night of the verdict, Clara was taken away in chains. Emily clung to her, sobbing, begging them not to take her mother. Clara kissed her forehead through the tears. "Be strong, Emily. Live. Don't let his shadow darken your life anymore. That's all I want for you." As the prison gates closed behind her, Clara knew her freedom was gone, but she also knew she had stopped the man who had destroyed her daughter's innocence. The world would call her a killer. She called herself a mother. And as the cell door clanged shut, her whispered words echoed in the dark. "I did what I had to do, but I did it for her." Clara Simmons' story is not one of simple crime or punishment, it's a haunting tale of motherhood, betrayal, and the devastating weight of secrets. In one night, love transformed into horror, and rage turned into irreversible action. Her act, though born of protection, left behind scars that no healing could erase. What do you think? If you were in Clara's position, faced with the man who hurt your child on the night of your wedding, what would you have done? If you were moved by this heartbreaking story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who follows true crime narratives. Join the discussion in the comments below, and stay tuned for more chilling stories where love, betrayal, and justice collide.